The morning was quiet at Margaret's old farmhouse, the kind of silence that comes only after years of living alone. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and sunlight slipped through the curtains, painting soft lines on the wooden floor. Margaret moved slowly, used to her calm routines, feeding the chickens, watering the plants, and then sitting by the porch to watch the fields. It was peaceful, if a little lonely. Her husband had passed years ago, and the rest of the family hardly visited anymore, but that peace was interrupted when she heard the crunch of gravel from the road. She looked up, squinting against the bright light, and saw a dark pickup truck turning into her driveway. No one had called to say they were coming. Her heart gave a nervous flutter. Visitors were rare here, especially unannounced ones. The truck door opened and a tall young man stepped out. For a second, she couldn't place him. But when he smiled, that same boyish grin, she remembered it, hit her all at once. "Evan?" she said softly, almost in disbelief. He grinned wider. "Hey, Grandma Maggie." Her heart warmed instantly. "Oh my goodness, Evan Carter. It's been years." He walked up the porch steps and hugged her, and for a moment all the years between them vanished. She remembered the little boy who used to chase chickens in her yard, the one who'd call her Grandma Maggie. Even though she wasn't his blood grandmother, her late husband's son's boy, but it had been so long. The last time she saw him, he was a teenager. Now, he looked like a man, broad-shouldered, confident, but with a softness in his eyes that made him seem lost. She smiled, though she couldn't hide her surprise. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "I needed to get away," he said, glancing toward the open fields. "City life's been too loud. I thought maybe I could stay for a few days if that's okay." "Of course, it's okay," she said immediately. "You don't even have to ask." He carried his bag inside, and soon the quiet farmhouse felt alive again, boots on the floorboards, laughter in the kitchen, the sound of another voice besides her own. Margaret made him pancakes, and as they ate, he told her little bits about his life. He'd finished college, worked for a while in construction, and recently gone through a bad breakup. He said it like it didn't matter, but Margaret could hear the pain behind the casual words. She didn't press him. She just listened. Listening was something she'd learned to do well over the years. After lunch, he went outside to help fix the fence that had been broken since spring. She watched from the porch, sipping her tea, quietly amazed. He worked with a quiet determination, sleeves rolled up, sun catching the edge of his jawline. She hadn't realized how much she missed having someone around. When he came back inside, sweaty and smiling, he said, "That fence was stubborn, but I got it." She laughed softly. "You sound just like your grandpa." He looked at her for a moment. "He used to say that about me." That made her heart twist a little. She missed her husband deeply, his calm voice, his laughter. Evan's presence felt like a piece of that old warmth returning to her life. That evening, the two of them sat on the porch. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky orange and pink. The fields stretched endlessly before them, and the world seemed softer somehow. "It's nice here," Evan said quietly. "Peaceful. I forgot how much I liked it." She smiled. "It hasn't changed much. Just gotten quieter." He turned to her, his voice low. "You ever get lonely out here?" She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Sometimes. This silence gets heavy, but I've learned to live with it." He looked at her, eyes thoughtful. "You shouldn't have to." The words caught her off guard. They were simple, but they carried a kindness she hadn't heard in a long time. She looked at him, really looked tan for the first time. She saw not the boy who used to visit, but a grown man who carried his own sadness when their eyes met. Something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't simple either. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust her shawl. "Well," she said softly, "that's life. It gives and it takes." He nodded, but she could feel his gaze linger. As the evening deepened, the air turned cooler. Evan started a small fire in the pit outside, and they sat by it, wrapped in blankets. He told her stories from the city about long nights working, loud streets, and people who seemed to forget how to care. She listened, occasionally smiling, sometimes frowning. feeling more connected with every word. When the fire burned low, he said, "You know, Grandma, Maggie, you're probably the only person I feel like I can actually talk to." Her throat tightened. "That's sweet, Evan. But surely there are people your age you can talk to." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but none of them listen the way you do." She looked at him then, her heart soft and full. The flickering firelight made his face glow, and for a strange, fleeting second, she forgot the years between them. When he stood to go inside, she stayed by the fire a little longer, thinking. It wasn't just his presence that made her heart race. It was the reminder of what she'd lost. Companionship, conversation, someone who made her feel seen later that night. After washing the dishes and locking the doors, she stood by the window of her room. The light from the barn glowed faintly in the distance where Evan had gone to check something. She could see his shadow moving, calm and steady. She smiled to herself, a quiet ache in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something smaller, something tender, a reminder that she was still alive, that her heart could still feel. When she finally went to bed, the old farmhouse seemed warmer than it had in years. She could hear the soft sound of the rain beginning outside, tapping against the windows. The kind of sound that makes you think too much. Remember too much? Margaret closed her eyes and told herself it was just family affection, nothing more. She had raised children, cared for others, and loved deeply once before. She knew the difference between kindness and longing. But as the night deepened and the house settled into silence, a strange thought drifted into her mind, one she quickly pushed away. Maybe, just maybe, her heart was waking up again. She rolled over and tried to sleep, telling herself it was foolish to think that way. Yet even as she drifted off, a faint smile touched her lips. Somewhere deep down, she already knew something had shifted that day. Something quiet, complicated, beautiful. The unexpected visit had changed everything, and though she didn't yet understand why, she could feel that the line between family and feeling was beginning to blur. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the old curtains, lighting up the farmhouse kitchen. Margaret woke earlier than usual, feeling strangely restless. She could already hear the distant sound of hammering outside. Curious, she stepped onto the porch, holding her cup of coffee. And there he was, Evan, working on the fence that had been broken for months. He was focused, sleeves rolled up, hands steady. The morning light caught the edges of his hair, and for a moment, she just watched quietly. It wasn't about attraction, it was the simple joy of seeing someone care, someone helping without being asked. It made the place feel alive again. When he noticed her, he smiled. "Good morning, Grandma Maggie. Hope you don't mind, I started early." "I don't mind at all," she said with a soft laugh. "I'm just surprised anyone remembers that fence exists." He grinned. It looked like it needed some attention. "Guess I did too." That answer stayed with her longer than it should have. Later, as they shared breakfast, Evan spoke about his job in the city. The stress, the loneliness, the noise that never stopped. He looked older than his years, not in his face, but in his spirit. Margaret listened quietly, her heart aching a little. She saw herself in him years ago, when she too had felt lost and unseen. After breakfast, he offered to help her with chores. They spent the day side by side, cleaning the barn, sorting tools, fixing the chicken coop. It felt easy, natural, like they had always done this. Every time he smiled at her or thanked her for a glass of lemonade, she felt something unfamiliar, something she hadn't felt since before her husband died. Companionship when evening came. They sat on the porch again. The air was cooler, the fields golden in the fading light. Margaret wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and Evan sat close beside her, his arm brushing against hers. It was such a small thing, but she felt her heart skip. She told herself it was nothing. Just the warmth of being near someone after so many years alone. "You've kept this place in amazing shape," Evan said, looking around. "I don't know how you do it all by yourself." She smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what a little stubbornness can do." He laughed softly. "Guess that runs in the family." The laughter faded, and for a moment there was only silence between them. Then Evan spoke again, voice low and thoughtful. I didn't just come here to get away. I came because I didn't know where else to go. That simple confession hit her deeply. She turned toward him. You can always come here, Evan. Your family. He looked at her then, eyes searching. I know, but sometimes it feels like more than that. The air changed. Her heartbeat quickened, though she tried to stay calm. What do you mean? She asked softly. Days passed quietly after the storm. Evan stayed longer than he'd planned, though neither of them mentioned it. Margaret didn't ask when he'd leave. She liked having him there. The house felt alive again, the way it once did when her husband was around. When laughter and voices filled the air instead of silence, every morning Evan helped with chores. He'd fix a squeaky door hinge or carry firewood inside, always finding something to do. In return, Margaret cooked warm meals and told stories about the old days, how she and his grandfather had built the porch together, how they used to dance barefoot in the rain. Evan listened with quiet fascination, always asking for more. But as the days slipped by, something began to change. It wasn't in what they said it was in what they didn't. Their conversations became softer, clauses longer, their eyes lingering on each other a little too long. They both felt it but pretended not to. One afternoon, Margaret was tending to her garden when Evan walked up behind her, holding a small bunch of wildflowers. For you, he said simply. She smiled, taking them with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. You didn't have to do that. Wanted to, he said. You deserve flowers once in a while. It was an innocent gesture, but the way he said it made her heart skip. She tried to hide her reaction, turning to arrange the flowers in a jar. Her hands trembled slightly. She scolded herself quietly, was just kindness. She told herself nothing more. That evening, they ate dinner on the porch. The sunset painted the sky in orange and violet streaks, and the air smelled of summer grass. It was peaceful, but there was a quiet tension neither could name. Evan was the one who broke it. I've been thinking, he said softly, staring out at the fields. I don't think I've ever met anyone like you. Margaret smiled nervously. That's because I'm old-fashioned. People like me don't exist much anymore. He shook his head. No, it's more than that. You actually care. You listen. You make people feel safe. She laughed lightly, trying to ease the weight of his tone. That's just what grandmothers do, sweetheart. But he didn't smile. His gaze stayed fixed on her, steady and full of something deeper. You're more than that to me. The words hung in the air like a sudden gust of wind. She froze, unsure how to react. Evan, she said softly, don't say things you'll regret. He turned toward her, his voice trembling slightly. I'm not regretting anything. I know it's complicated. I know how it sounds. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. Her heart pounded. The world seemed to go still, the wind, the birds, even her breath. She wanted to speak, but words wouldn't come. He continued, voice raw and honest. I don't know when it started. Maybe the night we talked by the fire. Maybe when you made me breakfast that first morning. All I know is that when I'm here with you, I don't feel lost anymore. She looked away, blinking hard to stop the tears forming in her eyes. Evan, you're young. You're confused. I remind you of comfort, of home. That's all this is. He shook his head. No, it's not. You make me feel alive again. The honesty in his voice shook her. She couldn't look at him. Her heart wanted to believe him, but her mind screamed that it was wrong. We can't, she whispered. Your family. The world wouldn't understand. I don't care what the world thinks, he said quietly. But I do, she replied, finally meeting his eyes. I've lived long enough to know that some things, no matter how real they feel, can't happen. He looked down, silent for a moment. Then he said, You care about me, don't you? The question cut straight through her. She wanted to lie, to deny it. But her silence said everything. I see it, he said softly, in the way you look at me. The way you try not to. She closed her eyes. You should go back to the city soon, she whispered. He sighed, standing up. If that's what you want? But when he walked away, she didn't stop him. She sat there, the ache in her chest growing heavier. She didn't know if she was angry at him or herself for letting it go this far, for feeling something she shouldn't. That night, the farmhouse felt cold again. She couldn't sleep. She got up, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and went to the window. The moonlight poured over the fields, silver and still. In the distance, she saw the glow of light from the guest room where Evan stayed. He was awake too. She thought about the way he'd looked at her, the honesty, the confusion, the pain. It wasn't lust or obsession. It was loneliness meeting loneliness, two hearts trying to find peace in the wrong place. Her tears finally fell. She whispered to herself, "This isn't love. It can't be." But her heart didn't believe it. The next morning, she avoided him. She stayed busy cleaning the kitchen, sweeping the porch, doing anything to keep her mind distracted. But he found her eventually. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have said what I did." She turned, forcing a smile. "You have nothing to be sorry for. We both said things we shouldn't." He nodded, but there was sadness in his eyes. "I just don't want to lose you. You're the only person who's ever made me feel like I belong." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to lose me, Evan. You'll always have a place here. Just not that way." He gave a small, broken smile. "Yeah, I understand." He started to walk away, but she reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "Evan," she said softly, "you're a good man. Don't let this confuse you. You deserve real love with someone who can walk beside you without fear." He looked at her one last time, eyes full of things he didn't say. Then he nodded and left the room. Margaret stood there, her heart aching. She knew she had done the right thing, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. That night, she sat on the porch alone, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The silence returned, the kind she used to find comforting. But now it felt different, heavier, because she knew what it meant to feel seen again. Somewhere inside, she wished she could turn back time to be just a woman and a man, without titles or names between them. But life didn't work that way. Still, she whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for reminding me. My heart still works." It wasn't love, not in the way stories told it. But it was real, and it was hers. And as the stars appeared one by one, she knew that no matter what the world would say, part of her would always remember that summer, the one when her heart crossed a line she never thought it could. Summer was fading. The once green fields had turned gold, and the days were growing shorter. Margaret knew that soon Evan would have to go back to the city. The thought filled her with quiet sadness. But she kept her feelings hidden behind gentle smiles and small talk. Evan had changed in the weeks he'd stayed. He wasn't the same restless young man who had arrived with questions and confusion. He'd found a kind of peace, though it came wrapped in pain. And Margaret, though she didn't admit it aloud, had found a part of herself she thought was gone forever. They avoided talking about that night on the porch. Their bond was still there, but now it lived under the surface, silent and careful. They both knew what had happened and what could never happen again. One morning, the air felt different, cool, still, and final. Evan came down the stairs with his bags packed. Margaret was in the kitchen pouring coffee, pretending to be calm. So he said softly, "I guess this is goodbye." She looked up and tried to smile. "You'll come back soon," she said. "The farm will miss you." He chuckled lightly. "Just the farm?" Her eyes softened. "Maybe a little more than that." There was a pause, the kind that says everything words can't. He walked closer, his expression gentle but full of unspoken emotion. "You've done more for me than you'll ever know," he said. "When I came here, I didn't even know who I was anymore. You gave me peace. You gave me something real." She wanted to tell him he'd done the same for her, that his laughter had brought life back into her home, that his kindness had healed parts of her heart she'd buried years ago. But she didn't. Instead, she said softly, "Sometimes people come into our lives to remind us that love doesn't always have to last, it just has to be true while it's here." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "I wish things were different." "So do I," she whispered. He reached for her hand, and she let him hold it. It wasn't wrong. Not this time, which was a simple human touch between two people who cared deeply. His hand was warm, steady, familiar. For a moment, they both closed their eyes, as if memorizing the feeling. When he finally stepped back, he said, "I'll write to you." She smiled sadly. "And I'll write back. But don't stay away too long, all right? This place will always have a chair waiting for you." He nodded, grabbed his bags, and turned toward the door. She watched him walk down the path toward the old pickup truck. The sound of gravel under his shoes felt like the ticking of a clocked step, taking him further away. When the truck finally disappeared down the dirt road, she stood there for a long time, her hand pressed against her chest. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something softer. Acceptance, maybe? The kind that hurts and heals at the same time. The next few weeks were quiet again. Margaret returned to her routines, feeding the chickens, tending the garden, reading by the fire at night. But everything around her carried traces of him. The porch swing where they'd talked for hours. The mug he always used for coffee. The wildflowers he'd picked, now dried and pressed between the pages of an old book. Sometimes she would catch herself talking aloud as if he were still there. "Evan, don't forget the gate," she'd murmur, smiling at her own foolishness. But deep down, she didn't mind the memories. They were all she had left of that strange, beautiful summer. One evening, as autumn began to settle in, she received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, bold, and slightly uneven. Her heart lifted before she even opened it. "Dear Margaret," it began, "I hope the farm is still as beautiful as I remember. I've been thinking about you a lot, about everything you said. I'm trying to find who I really am. I got a small job at a local paper. I'm writing again, and it feels good. You were right. I needed to stop running from the world. You helped me see that." She smiled as she read, her eyes misting over. The letter continued. "You taught me that love isn't always about holding on. It's about letting someone become who they're meant to be. You'll always be a part of my story, Margaret. Always." She pressed the paper to her chest, closing her eyes. The ache inside her softened into something peaceful. It wasn't regret she felt, it was gratitude. That night, as the stars came out, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea and whispered to the wind, "I'm proud of you, Evan." Years passed. Seasons changed. The farm grew older, just like her. But she never forgot him. Sometimes when she looked out over the fields, she could almost see him there, young, kind, smiling in the sunlight. Then one spring morning, another letter came. It had been a long time since the last one. Inside was a short note and a photograph. "Margaret," it read, "I thought you'd want to see this. I'm getting married. Her name's Emily. She's kind and reminds me a little of you. I wanted you to know that you were the one who showed me what love really means. Thank you for that." She looked at the picture of Anne standing beside a young woman with bright eyes and a gentle smile. They looked happy. Truly happy. Tears filled her eyes. But this time they were sweet, not sad. She whispered to herself, "Good for you, my boy." That night, she lit a small candle on the porch. The flame flickered softly in the dark, casting warm light across her face. She felt a strange peace settle over her. Love, she realized, didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to end in forever. Sometimes it was enough just to have existed, to have touched another soul and left them better than before. As the candle burned low, she looked up at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, she knew Evan was looking at the same sky. Some hearts, she whispered, never really say goodbye. And in that quiet moment, she felt no loneliness, just warmth, just gratitude. The memory of a summer that crossed the line not in sin, but in emotion, in honesty, in the courage to feel alive again. It was never about breaking rules. It was about two people healing in each other's company. Learning that love isn't always about age, timing, or logic. Sometimes it's just about being seen, truly seen for who you are. Margaret finished her tea, blew out the candle, and went inside. The night was calm, the air cool, and for the first time in years, she felt at peace with everything that had happened as she closed her eyes that night. She knew she would dream not of what could have been, but of what had been. And that was enough.